When Mark and Olivia Henderson first laid eyes on the house in the Hollywood Hills, they thought they had found their dream home. It was a mid-century modern masterpiece, perched high enough to offer a panoramic view of Los Angeles. Floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed wooden beams, and a sunken living room that still carried echoes of old Hollywood glamour. The real estate agent had been eager to close the deal, skimming over the property's history. It was owned by Quentin Tarantino for years, she mentioned offhandedly. But he never really lived here full-time. He used it mostly for writing, private screenings, that sort of thing. It didn't matter to the Hendersons. Mark was an aspiring screenwriter, and the idea of living in a home once inhabited by one of his idols felt like a sign. Olivia, a film editor, was more practical, but even she was enchanted by the house's unique character. It was within their budget, almost suspiciously so, but after a year of house hunting, they weren't about to let it slip away. The first few weeks were blissful. They spent their evenings on the patio, drinking wine and watching the city lights flicker like fireflies below. Olivia worked late in her upstairs editing suite, while Mark sat at the grand oak desk in what had once been Tarantino's writing room, hoping some of the director's genius would rub off on him. Then, strange things started happening. At first, it was just little oddities. The turntable in the living room would start playing by itself, always something from the 60s or 70s. A faint scent of cigar smoke would waft through the hallways, even though neither of them smoked. Olivia often swore she heard the sound of an old film reel running late at night, but Mark chalked it up to her overactive imagination. Maybe it's just the house settling, he suggested. Or maybe it's haunted, Olivia teased. They laughed. For a while, things escalated after Mark found the script. It was buried in a drawer in the old writing room, a weathered leather-bound screenplay with no title, no cover page, no credits. Just a thick stack of yellowed pages, written in Tarantino's unmistakable style. It wasn't a finished script, more like a collection of fragmented scenes. Some were violent, others bizarrely funny. But the last few pages were different, disturbingly real. It was a conversation between two people, one of whom was describing a presence in the house. The dialogue was eerily similar to things Olivia had said in passing about the film reel sounds, the cigar smoke, even the way shadows seemed to shift in the hallway. Mark felt a chill creep up his spine. That night, he read the final scene aloud to Olivia. It described a couple unnamed who had moved into the house, only to realize too late that something had been left behind, something unfinished. The script ended abruptly, mid-sentence. Maybe he was working on a horror movie, Olivia suggested, though her voice was uneasy. Mark wasn't convinced. But why would he leave it here? Neither of them had an answer. That night, they both dreamed of a man standing at the foot of their bed, his face obscured by shadow. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Just stood there watching. When they woke up, the script was gone. The days blurred into a kind of fevered unreality. Olivia worked in her upstairs editing suite, but she found herself distracted, pausing too often, listening. The house had a way of amplifying silence, making the absence of sound feel heavier than noise. She'd sit at her desk, headphones in, adjusting the color on a scene, and then, the reel again, that same low whirring hum. At first, she told herself it was coming from outside someone's home theater, or a vintage film enthusiast playing old reels somewhere in the canyon. But it wasn't. It was inside the house, distant but persistent. A mechanical rhythm spooling film, feeding it through unseen gears. She stood, hesitated. The sound came from below. Mark was in the writing room, hunched over his laptop, his fingers still on the keys but unmoving. He was staring straight ahead, at the bookshelves. The hidden panel in the wall, the one they had only discovered a few days ago, was slightly ajar. "You hear that?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded slowly. "Yeah." They stood together, listening. Click, click, click. A projector, the old kind, with film threading through metal reels. It started up in the distance, the flickering sound of an image playing against a surface. A faint, rhythmic clicking, the sound of celluloid running through gears. The house had no projector. Mark swallowed hard. "It's coming from downstairs." Olivia felt a pull, a heavy unease settling deep in her chest. But she moved first, stepping cautiously toward the hallway, then down the floating wooden staircase, gripping the handrail so tightly her knuckles went white. The house was dark except for the ambient glow from the city lights outside. The living room stretched before them, the sunken floor empty, the turntable silent, but the sound continued somewhere deeper, past the kitchen, toward the screening room. It had been one of the house's major selling points. A small private theater with 10 plush seats, blacked-out walls, a massive blank screen, and state-of-the-art projection equipment. The first time they had stepped inside, Mark had grinned like a kid, already envisioning midnight movie marathons. Now, the door stood slightly open, an almost imperceptible sliver of warm yellow light cutting into the darkness. Mark reached it first. He hesitated only a moment before pushing the door open. The room was empty. The modern projector was off, its controls lifeless. The seats, untouched. But the screen was flickering. Not with anything digital. The images were grainy, black and white, projected from something older. The footage was crude, jittery. A dimly lit room, familiar in its angles. A wide shot of the writing room upstairs. Then a cut, a different angle. Someone was sitting at the desk, though the details were blurred, indistinct. The figure moved slightly, a restless shift in posture. Another cut, closer now. The figure remained hunched over, scribbling something onto a page. Mark's breath hitched in his throat. This is the writing room. It was their house. And the figure. Cut. A slow push-in toward the man at the desk. The camera lingered, just enough for them to make out his clothes, his posture. The way his hand moved across the page. Mark. Cut. Mark sitting at the desk from a different angle. But it wasn't footage from tonight, this was older, grainier. As if it had been filmed long before they had ever stepped into the house. Cut. The angle widened. Someone else stood behind him. A figure. Tall. Motionless. Watching. Cut. Mark turned. Looked up. But in the footage, his face wasn't visible, only the back of his head. The tension in his shoulders. The shadowed figure behind him did not move. The film flickered, the celluloid burning at the edges. Then, the screen went black. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The silence in the screening room was absolute. Mark's breath was shallow, his fingers trembling at his sides. Olivia stood beside him, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes locked on the now blank screen. The room was dark again, save for the sliver of city light bleeding through the doorway. Neither of them moved. The air was thick, heavy in a way that felt unnatural, as if the walls themselves were pressing inward. The faint scent of something chemical lingered, burnt film, the acrid tang of celluloid scorched by heat. Then a sound. Behind them, a slow, deliberate creak. They turned at the same time. The seats were empty. The projector remained silent. But something felt different, an unseen shift in the atmosphere. The shadows along the back wall seemed deeper, less defined, as though they were pooling into something darker than the rest of the room. Mark swallowed. We should go. Olivia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They stepped backward, keeping their eyes on the screen as if expecting it to flicker back to life at any moment. As Mark reached for the door handle, the floor groaned beneath them, not like wood settling, but like something shifting inside the walls. Then, a whisper. Not words, not even a voice, really, just a breath of sound, impossibly close. Olivia bolted. She didn't wait for Mark, didn't care if she looked ridiculous. She shoved through the door and into the hallway, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Her bare feet barely registered the polished wood floor as she sprinted for the stairs, the open space of the living room yawning before her, swallowing the city's glow. She only stopped when she reached the second floor. Mark was close behind, slamming the bedroom door shut behind them. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, gripping her knees, trying to steady her breathing. Mark paced in short, jerky movements, running a hand through his hair. Finally, she whispered, "That was you." Mark stopped. "The film," she continued, forcing herself to say it. "That was you at the desk." He nodded, but the movement was slow, uncertain. "I don't know when. I don't write by hand. I always type." Olivia closed her eyes, trying to make sense of it, but there was no logic, no explanation that didn't leave them with something worse. Then Mark spoke again. "That wasn't the first time I saw him." She looked up. Mark was standing near the window now, his face barely illuminated by the city glow outside. He looked ashamed or afraid. "I didn't want to say anything. I thought I was imagining it," he admitted. "But I've seen him before. A couple of times." Olivia's mouth felt dry. "Who?" Mark turned to her, his eyes dark. "The man from the film." The room felt colder. "When?" she asked. "The first time," Mark exhaled, rubbing his face. "A few nights after we moved in. I was up late writing. I looked up, and I saw someone standing in the hallway, just past the door. A shadow, mostly. No details. Just standing there." Olivia's stomach clenched. "You didn't wake me up?" "I thought I was tired. I told myself it was a trick of the light." He sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. "It happened again last week. Same place. I turned my head, and he was just there." A cold weight settled in Olivia's chest. "Did he move?" Mark hesitated. Then, "No." Silence stretched between them. Then Olivia whispered, "What does he want?" Mark didn't answer. He didn't know. But deep down, Olivia suspected something. She thought about the film, about the way it had been watching them, documenting them. She thought about the missing script, the pages Mark had found, detailing things they had said, things that had happened. And she thought about the way the film ended. Mid-sentence, unfinished. She shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself, suddenly chilled to the bone. The house wasn't just haunted. It was waiting. That night, neither of them slept. The bedroom felt suffocating, the air stale as if it hadn't been touched in years. Olivia lay still, staring at the ceiling, her fingers gripping the edge of the blanket, though it did nothing to keep the cold from seeping into her skin. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, unmoving, lost in thought. Every so often, he turned his head toward the door, toward the dark hallway beyond, as if expecting to see something standing there. At some point, in the black quiet of early morning, Olivia whispered, "We should leave." Mark didn't answer right away. His fingers drummed once, twice, against his knee. "Yeah," he said finally, but he didn't sound certain. They both knew it wasn't that simple. By the time the sun crept through the windows, the fear from the night before had faded into something less sharp, something dull and nagging, like a headache that refused to go away. Mark tried to act normal. He made coffee, checked his phone, answered emails. Olivia did the same, throwing herself into work, editing footage, pretending that nothing had happened. But the house wasn't done with them. Late that afternoon, as Olivia sat at her desk, she heard it again. The real, soft, rhythmic, distant. Not coming from the screening room this time. Upstairs. The study. Her breath caught in her throat. She told herself not to go, to call Mark instead, to pretend she hadn't heard it at all. Instead, she found herself standing, moving toward the door. The hallway stretched long and empty, bathed in the dull gold light of evening. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the wooden floor, and the air was thick, almost humid. The study door was open just a crack. The sound of the film reel was louder now, more distinct. The clicking of metal gears, the faintest rustling of celluloid running through unseen fingers. She reached for the door. The moment she touched it, the sound stopped. The silence was heavier than the noise had been. For a second, she considered turning back. But then, something flickered inside the room. A dim glow, low and jittery, like candlelight. Olivia pushed the door open. The desk. Mark's desk. A single sheet of paper lay on top of it, yellowed and creased at the edges, as if it had been waiting there for years. Her breath hitched as she stepped closer. It was a script page, handwritten, and at the top, scrawled in black ink, were two words. Final scene. Olivia's skin prickled. The handwriting was familiar. Mark's. She reached out with unsteady fingers and turned the page over. Only one line was written. A description. He turns. He looks up. The man is standing behind him. Olivia's breath stopped. A shadow moved in the reflection of the desk's glass surface. Behind her, Olivia froze. For a moment, the room felt suspended in time, as if the air had thickened around her, holding her in place. The only thing that moved was the flickering glow from the window, the dim, sickly light of the setting sun shifting over the desk's glass top. And in that reflection, she saw it. The figure. Not her. Behind her. The shape was indistinct, more shadow than substance, but its presence was undeniable. It stood just within the doorway, silent and unmoving, watching her. Her pulse slammed against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to move, to do anything but stand there. But her body refused to listen. Her fingers clenched around the paper, the edges crinkling under the pressure. The reflection shifted. Not a movement, not a step, a flicker, a distortion like an old film skipping frames. The shape became sharper for just a second. A man, tall and motionless. His face blurred as if smeared across the air itself. And then, just as quickly, he was gone. But the feeling remained. A hollow space in the room where he had been. Olivia staggered backward, nearly knocking over the chair behind her. The script page slipped from her fingers, drifting to the floor. She turned, breath catching in her throat, but the doorway was empty. She was alone, or at least it looked that way. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The house was silent, pressing in on her from all sides. But something had changed. The air felt wrong. She backed toward the hallway, moving slowly, listening, waiting for anything to break the silence. But nothing did. The only sound was her own breathing, and the faintest echo of something else. A whisper, so soft she almost didn't hear it. But it wasn't coming from behind her. It was coming from the desk, from the page, the one she had dropped. She hesitated, then crouched down, fingers trembling as she picked it up. It had changed. The single line of text was still there, but below it, something new had been added. A second line in the same handwriting. She turns. She looks up. The man is standing behind her. A chill crawled up her spine. The words had been written before she picked up the page. Before she had turned. Before she had seen him. The floor creaked somewhere in the house. Not nearby. Downstairs. The living room. She didn't remember running. But suddenly, she was halfway down the stairs, gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles ached. The house was dim now, the last sliver of daylight fading behind the hills. Shadows stretched long across the floor. The air smelled faintly of old paper and something else, something metallic. Mark stood in the center of the living room. He wasn't moving. His back was to her, shoulders hunched, his head tilted slightly downward. He was staring at something in his hands. Piece of paper. Another page. She swallowed hard. Mark. He didn't turn. Didn't acknowledge her at all. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. A breath hitched in her throat. Mark. What are you looking at? Slowly, painfully slowly, his fingers curled around the page, crumpling the edges. His shoulders rose and fell in one sharp, uneven movement, like he had been holding his breath for too long. Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was low, distant. I didn't write this. A pause. Then he turned the page, holding it up so she could see. And Olivia felt the floor drop out from beneath her. There were only 2 lines written. He turns. He looks up. And below it, she is standing behind him. A cold breath stirred against the back of Olivia's neck. Olivia didn't turn. Every muscle in her body locked, her breath frozen in her throat. The air behind her felt thick, heavy, occupied. Mark's eyes widened as he stared past her. His mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. The paper in his hands trembled. The house was silent. No creaking floorboards. No distant hum of the reel. Just that suffocating, unnatural stillness. Then, a whisper. right against her ear. 2 words. Keep watching. Mark flinched, and then the lights went out. The house plunged into darkness, swallowing them whole. A new sound filled the air, familiar, mechanical. The whir of film threading through a reel, spooling, running. The screen in the home theater flickered to life. A new scene. Black and white. Grainy. The living room. 2 figures standing in the center, motionless, frozen. Mark and Olivia. Their own reflections, captured on film. But behind them, the third shape, tall, watching. And as the reel clicked forward, frame by frame the shadow moved, stepping closer, until the film burned out, and the house fell silent again. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.